What's up, guys? We're back in the shot with another RDT fishing report. We're going to talk a little bit about what to expect here on Lake Chickamauga in the upcoming weeks. We have a few tournaments coming up, the high school and the junior national championships. So we wanted to kind of give you guys, a couple ideas or clues during your off limits of what you may be looking forward to, to see in a few weeks coming up here on Chick.
Yeah, first of all, really looking forward to being able to see everybody for this tournament. Think the lake's, it's going to get pressured. It's going to fish small, but it's still got a chance to show out. And, TVA lakes and current, that's really the number one thing that everybody's always talked about on the Tennessee River is current. And that's the first thing we're going to address. This year, there's been very, very little rain. And I don't expect anything to change as far as the current goes between now and the tournament time. And so I would prepare for very little. And that's not going to matter if you're up in the tail race all the way to Chickamauga Dam itself and everywhere in between. There's going to be very little flow everywhere. Even the backs of the creeks that usually have, some water coming in off the mountains that's a little bit cooler, that's even kind of dried up. So really looking for some stagnant water, which a lot of times will mean that the fish are going to suspend more and they're not going to be as grouped up. A lot more singles. A lot of the schools are going to be busted up kind of by this time of year, normally anyways, but with that little current, that's going to kind of speed that process up as well. Another thing a lot of people talk about on the Tennessee River is grass. And, that's going to play a factor. And Connor's been out there a lot more this year than I have. So I'm going to let him explain kind of what he's seeing with the grass, what sections of the lake seem to have more and different things like that.
Yeah, you said a lot of really good stuff there with the lack of current. It's really changed a lot this year from what I've seen on just how fish are set up and how you're having to approach spots that you fish for years now. This year with there not being much current, you're having to kind of change up the way you fish. But the grass is going to be kind of a wild card for this event. The growth, the process throughout the year has been a little behind on the grass this year. When the water drops during the winter here, we lose most of our grass up on top of the bars, and the colder water kills a lot of the stuff that grows behind the bars. And it hasn't come back really great in a lot of places this year. It's just been different. There's grass in areas that there hasn't been grass before. There's no grass in areas there usually is. And it's also growing really fast right now. So some of the people that came down for pre-practice found some grass in areas that was real short, but that stuff can grow inches a week. So it's gonna be changing the whole time you're there, and that grass is could be a really big player in the fall. And this will be kind of early fall, if you will, on the way some of the fish are going to be set up just because of the pressure and just the way the lake's fishing right now. The grass is going to play a big role. There'll be a lot of fish caught out of the grass, and finding the areas that it is going to be important. On the bars and stuff, that there is grass on certain ones. Most of that grass is really in the mid to upper section of the lake, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. But up on top of the bars, it is growing the best. There's some grass behind the bars, some stuff that's left over from the winter time is still growing, and that stuff's kind of the stuff that's growing the best. But that definitely needs to be something you guys focus on.
Yeah, the one time I went out this summer, I actually saw some grass growing deeper than normal, like in that 12 to 15 feet range. And, that's very atypical for here. Most of the time, the edge is going to be in that 8 to 10 at the deepest. It's just something to search for. It's not going to be, this tournament's either going to be a deal where you can either sit in one spot and kind of camp and protect it, or you have a milk run of a bunch of little isolated one fish, two fish places. I think it's kind of how it's going to play out. But we're going to break the lake down into thirds. Chickamauga is a fairly good sized lake. It's over 30,000 acres. It's somewhere in the 40 something mile range, I think, from dam to dam. And so the first section we're going to break down would be from Watts Bar Dam to the Highway 60 bridge. And so takeoff will be at Dayton Boat Dock, which will be in that section. Included in that, you've got the main Tennessee River and the Hiawassee. And all of that section can play. Traditionally, not as many tournaments are won in that section of the lake, but you think back to the last Bass Elite Series that came here. Jason Christie won in that section of the lake. So it can play, especially when you have a bunch of boats in a tournament that are canceling each other out in the more popular sections of the lake. So, don't sleep on it. And if you're a very shallow water angler that you like to see visually what you're fishing, this is the section probably to be in. You got the actual tail race up at the dam, which is going to be the most current to be found pretty much anywhere on the lake. Although it's not going to be that much, you're going to be able to fish pretty freely up there. If you do go all the way to the dam itself, it gets a little shallow this time of year when there's not much current. So be wary and mindful of that. You come down the lake from there, you've got a bunch of creek mouths, you've got main riverbank, you've got some grass growing on the main riverbank, you've got bluffs, eddies, channel bends, different things, and any of those places can really hold fish. But I would stick more towards the main river if I was going to be from above the Hiawassee to the dam. I think that's going to be your best bet. The water, is in the easy mid 80s, and
it's been mid 80s, even high 80s in some of those backwaters.
And those fish in the backwaters are really not going to be. There's not going to be that many of them left. They're all going to pull to what little current there is. So just the main river, whether it's a stretch that doesn't have grass and it's the rock, such as bluffs or the laydowns, and the creek mouths, they have little ditches and things that feed into them that are somewhat offshore-y type spots. And then just the grass stretches, dragging a worm, throwing a vibrating jig, things like that in that section of the lake. And then you got the Hiawassee, which is basically another, between 14 and 20 miles of fishable water up there. And it actually comes out of another dam as well, but probably not going to be much current up in that end either. But it's going to be, that's a shallow water person's game. There's very, very little grass up the Hiawassee, and it's going to be fishing just visible cover, whether it's docks, rock bluffs again, or bridges, laydowns, things like that. But that's going to be a section of the lake that's kind of going to get overlooked. I think it's the section closest to takeoff, but there's a lot of fish get caught in that section of the lake as well. But it gets overlooked because that's not what everybody sees from local tournaments.
Yeah, if you come to Chickamauga in the late summer, you think ledges, you think current, you think everything we talked about. You can kind of get away from a few people in that Hiawassee River section. There's a ton of fish that live there. You don't see the numbers of big fish get caught up there. You'll see the occasional, giant get pulled out of the Hiawassee. But there's a lot of fish up there. There's a lot of fish to be caught. Fish shade lines, like Michael was saying, on up in the day. Fish wood and flip around. A little bit easier fishing, if you will, than getting out there with a lot of the pressure. But the Hiawassee's good. You can catch a lot of fish in the Hiawassee. I fished a college championship in August, and my partner Cole Sands and I did really well. We almost won the tournament in the Hiawassee. So don't overlook that area of the lake for sure. But we'll move on to the next section of the lake. We'll call this just the midsection. We'll say Highway 60 bridge down to the nuclear plant. There's a lot of water there. This is a really good section of the lake to break down. It's got a little bit of everything. It's got some of those upriver characteristics with the bluffs. It's got some of the laydowns and things like that. But you also start to get into more of the offshore Tennessee River style ledge fishings. There's island heads, there's river bars, there's creek channel mouths and ditches that dump into the main channel. So there's a lot more of that offshore style fishing that goes down in this section of the lake. I know Michael's got a lot of experience out here, and this midsection can be really good. You don't see the sheer numbers of offshore schools. Typically in this section, down towards the end of the section, around the nuclear plant, that's not always the case. But Michael can talk a little bit more about this section. It'll be a good one.
Yeah, the middle section is going to be good for sure. And you've got also, in addition to the main river there, you've got 3 main feeder creeks that really come into the lake. You've got Sail Creek, Possum Creek, and Saudi Creek. And, earlier I mentioned that those are the creeks that typically had the mountain water come down into them, but a lot of that has dried up. So it's the backs of them probably not going to play as much as they normally would, but there's a lot of resident fish in there. It's big enough, it's deep enough, has enough structure, enough cover to hold a good population of fish 365 days a year. And the tournament can get one out of either of those 3 creeks, any time of the year. So I would definitely be taking a look at those, as well as the main river section. Like he said, a lot of the schools in this section are not quite as big as they are on the very lower end. But, that could be to your advantage if you're looking for a place to rotate through a bunch of different spots in a day. As far as cover in that section, there's some grass, not a whole ton of natural cover in that section. In the creeks, I would say there's quite a bit of natural cover, stumps and things, but on the main river itself, if you're looking for any kind of cover, isolated brush piles that either wash-ins that the currents washed in different places, or people have actually went and put out brush piles in this section of the lake. But it's kind of overlooked as well. Definitely won't have as much pressure in that section as it will the very bottom end. But again, perfect area to win a tournament and catch a lot of fish. But it's really just going to come down to doing something a little bit different, presentation-wise. Being able to stay back off the fish, maybe even turning your electronics off and just camping on a place that you can kind of have off the wall. But a lot of fish in that area can be really good, will be good this time of year. But, the most popular by far is from the nuclear plant to the dam. And this includes Harrison Bay, Dallas Bay, or known by most people as Chester Frost. And that section of the lake historically has been the best for years and years, and will continue to be so. There's just more spawning habitat down on that end of the lake for big populations of bass and big ones. It's just the best section, no doubt. But that's going to draw the most attention as well. So there's a lot of big schools that get out down there, but those big schools in a tournament of this magnitude are going to have, some of them probably have 10 boats on them at a time. And I don't think you can win the tournament doing that. I think you can have a really good finish. But if you're just relying on everything now pretty much is a community hole.
Yeah, there's nothing. Don't expect to have anything to yourself and find offshore.
Yeah, not if it's a school of fish, for sure. So, if you can find, places that there's a lot of natural cover on that end of the lake still. Lots of deeper stumps and things like that. Isolated rock out off the bank. And down there, it's really going to be 100% offshore. There is one big major creek down there, Wolf Beaver. It's got some deep docks and things like that, and it could be a few fish caught in there, shallow, on visible cover and things. But pretty much down there for that bottom end, you're going to have to be offshore. And offshore is kind of a weird term to people. Most people associate offshore or ledges with 15 to 35 feet of water, but offshore to us is anything that's just not on the bank. It can be 2 feet of water and grass, that's offshore. A 25 feet deep ledge, that's offshore as well. So anything in between down there, it's just going to be an area to where you have to go and cover a bunch of water to find where fish are. And again, those few groups of really big schools, probably not what you're going to want to look for to win the tournament, but more of the smaller, isolated patches of fish.
And you're going to definitely have to move with the fish. The fish this time of year and moving forward throughout the year get busted up just due to the pressure and just due to the nature of the fish kind of transitioning from their summertime post-spawn stuff more to fall time areas. So you'll have to move and adjust with the fish every day, sometimes too. They get really bad this time of year about getting on a place one day and you'll be able to catch some and then come back the next day and there not be that many there. That has to do with the current generation and things like that as well. But just being able to be fluid and move with the fish will be important. This section of the lake, that lower end, does have grass. There is some really good and productive stretches of grass, but it's like anything else. It's there's there's grass where there's grass, and there's not where there's not. You know, so the people that grass is going to get a little bit of pressure too. You know, but being able to find some stuff that's a little secluded, back channel, will be big, and you can win, absolutely win out of grass on that lower section. You don't have to be fishing, you know, some offshore structure, but you can definitely get right down there doing that stuff.
Yeah, I think as far as, we're going to go into kind of some bait selection now. And one thing really for the whole lake, I think as a whole, your best bet is going to be to, once you find some fish, you get a couple bites, is to really slow down and kind of milk it. Whether that's with forward-facing sonar presentations, your mid-strolling type things, or, throwing a Nico rig, throwing a drop shot, throwing a big worm, anything like that. I really think that's going to be the biggest player, is being able to fish slow this time of year, especially with no current. If something happens and there is a lot of current, that's when like your Little John DDs, your deep diving crankbaits, things like that are really going to be bigger players. And some of those traditional, more reaction style baits will get some bites during the tournament. But I think as a whole, I'm going to let Connor take this part as far as some suggestions for baits for these two tournaments. I think you're going to see a trend that it's kind of slower stuff for the most part.
Yeah, when you get that bite window offshore that you see a lot, your reaction style baits are big players, because you can move them faster, you can catch more fish in that short period of time that they are biting. But when that is not going on, which is often the case, you got to be able to slow down and drag some stuff, because due to that boat pressure, it's going to be harder to run around and trigger those and hit those windows. So you got to be able to lock into an area that you can get on and be able to slow down and give them some different presentations that stay in front of them longer for those fish that are a little more reluctant to eat. Like Michael said, the forward-facing sonar presentations obviously are getting way more attention now. That mid-strolling stuff is extremely effective, both when they're feeding in those feeding frenzies, or when they're slowed down and it's hard to get a bite. You can keep a bait in front of them and fish more efficiently that way. Mid-strolling with a lighter weight, throwing a lighter weight the lightest weight you can get away with has been really important this year, just because, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, like you can just keep it in front of those fish for longer. I like a Hog Farmer Spunk Shad, the 4.5 and 5.5 inch. You can put it on the jig head and just get it in front of those fish and fish really effectively and pick off individual fish. That owner Range Roller Head is a really, really good one. We have a bunch of them in stock here at the store. It's kind of been hard to get your hands on, but we do have those, and we should have some left over for most of you guys if you're interested for the tournament. But you can also throw baits like a Z-Man. Scented Jerk Shad's a good one too. Things like that. There's a bunch of other ones now that are specifically designed for that mid-strolling stuff. That's a good option. A worm is been around forever and has caught fish for as long as time. Worm still produces. You can throw a small worm, like a Roboworm, that morning dawn 6-inch straight tail morning dawn Roboworm. There's really no telling how many fish be fallen victim to the Roboworm. But you can throw that on a drop shot. That's a really good one. I like a Nico rig as well. I know Michael really likes a Nico rig. He made a lot of money on the Nico rig, and that's a really good option. Fish both shallow in the grass and brush and offshore on those offshore spots. I like a Magnum hitworm, Berkley Powerbait Maxscent. That's a really good one. It's hard to beat that one. Just put a nail weight in the end of that one, depending on the depth range you're fishing and the kind of structure you're fishing. That'll dictate the size weight you use. That Dobbins nail weight is one of my favorite. It doesn't come out, the fish don't sling it out of the bait when they come up and jump all the time. For that Magnum hitworm right there, that's a killer. All fishing it in any type of structure right now this time of year, that's a killer. And you can never leave the bank without the O monster. The Zoom O monster is a really good one, and any type of natural, typical worm color. I mean, your green pumpkins work really good. Plum apple, plum, red bug, all those colors work really good. And to talk about the reaction baits, a hair jig's really good. This True Bass Shuttlecock is my favorite hair jig. It's a really good one. It gets a lot of bites. You can also catch some bigger fish out of the schools with the hair jig. It seems like, if you get bit on a hair jig, it's more than likely going to be a decent fish. And a Lake Fork flutter spoon is a really good one too to get those fish fired up. It's a really good bait as well when those fish are suspended, and you can kind of trigger some of that feeding activity with the spoon every now and then as well. But that's kind of the rundown on baits. I think keeping it simple, keeping 5 or 6 rods is going to be important. Not trying to reinvent the wheel. That's something I always do in tournaments when I go. Is you see fish down there, they're down there, and you go through the whole tackle box trying to get a bite, and you really just gotta keep it simple, keep a bait in front of the fish, and they're gonna bite when they want to.
Yeah, and confidence is a big key. These are Connor specific confidence baits. I've got my own confidence baits. Everybody's got their own little confidence niche that they have, but like you said, don't overcomplicate it. Just finding the fish, being around the fish is going to be the main thing, and they're going to bite at certain windows throughout the day. And with the current not changing, you can move around and not be in a bad spot. Like, the current window is not going to generate way more to really make them bite at any time throughout the tournament day typically. In the evenings they may generate a little bit more, but that's typically after the tournament's over. So don't be afraid to keep rotating spots. If you have one spot, that's not a bad idea either, just to camp on it. And something I've done in tournaments where I felt like I really couldn't move around is just not fish. I mean, it seems kind of counterintuitive to not even have a line in the water, but just not make any noise with your electronics, turn everything off, try and use the trolling motor as little as possible, and let those fish think they've got a good break and not having any pressure, or just fish way around the outside of them, and then go back with your reaction baits and see if you can pick another one or two off, get the school fired back up. And the team that wins this is going to be a very mentally tough team. It's not going to be an easy tournament by any means for any team out there, I don't feel like.
It's going to be hot.
It's going to be hot. That's another thing to touch on, fish care. TH Marine, G-Juice, Rejuvenate, any of those options, and ice. Ice is going to be a really big deal. Make sure you start out with some ice in your live well. And it doesn't matter if you're catching your fish in 6 inches or 25, 30 feet of water, they still are going to need some ice to keep oxygen levels in your live well at a good level. Flip clips, another good option, help keep them down. If you're catching them in deeper water, help them keep them upright. And, that's the flip clips and G-Juice and Rejuvenator items we have in the store. We're going to have a pretty decent stock of it. We feel like we've done a good job of preparing for these tournaments, and we're really looking forward to having you guys here. We're going to put specific links to these products in the description. Good luck to you, and we'll see you here in a couple weeks.
Yep, thank you guys. We look forward to it. I know you guys are as well. And make sure you come by the shop to see us when you're down there. See you guys.